Welcome back to our Cael language series. Today we're going to continue working on our speaking skills. This will be the 6th episode in our speaking series, and we're going to focus again today on independent speaking type B, which is the second speaking question on the Cael test. Now, as we've done in previous episodes, we will spend about 4 or 5 minutes looking at the rater's checklist. So these are the skills that you're going to need to demonstrate effectively when you record your answers for the Cael speaking test, and this is where your score is going to come from. If you've seen the other episodes and you're familiar with this checklist, please feel free to skip ahead in this video about 4 or 5 minutes, but we'll review these skills now. The very first thing that the raters are going to assess as they listen to your recordings are your delivery skills. So it's really important to speak loudly enough to be heard and at a comfortable speed, not too fast, not too slow. You'll need to make sure that your pronunciation is clear so that the listeners can always hear what it is you're saying. Your rhythm and your intonation should be natural and should flow very smoothly. You'll notice that the voice tends to rise and fall in intonation, depending on which words that we're stressing as more important, and also depending on how we're organizing the ideas. Hopefully you can speak from beginning to end of your response with very few pauses and very few interjections. Now, interjections are sounds that sometimes we make when we're not sure what we'll say next. You might hear somebody say or ah or something to that effect. And although that's natural to a point, I think we'll all interject once in a while. We want to make sure that we're not doing it too frequently because that would really frustrate the listener. So we practice at home speaking fluently from beginning to end. Once your delivery skills are finished, you're going to move on to your accuracy of language. This incorporates 2 things. So you'll really want to focus, on how suitable your words are for the task in which you're answering. You're going to want to make sure that the words you're choosing are accurate and precisely used. This is an academic test, so please try to use academic or higher level vocabulary as well. The more specific, the better. It's really important to have a nice variety as well. We don't want to just repeat the same word or phrase over and over again throughout the response. So if you are working on your vocabulary at home, you'll have a wider range in which to impress the raters, we hope. Please speak in complete sentences and try to demonstrate as well a nice range of different structures. Again, because this is an academic test, you'll want to focus on complex sentence structure and compound sentence structure quite frequently. Connect your sentences together as well, please, using transitions or signal words or conjunctions. Conjunctions are connecting words that will combine 2 shorter ideas together to create those compound and complex structures. So when we do that effectively, we will have a very academic and correct response. The content, of course, is going to be assessed. So how well you answer the question is looked at here. The beginning of your answer should identify the topic to which you're referring. This is your main idea. And the rest of your response will provide supporting points with lots of detail and specific examples to really give the listener a full picture of what it is that you are discussing. Your tone is important. Again, remember this is academic. So you want to sound confident and direct, but you don't want to sound too casual. You don't want to use slang or idiomatic language. I would try as well maybe not even to use phrasal verbs, just in case we create too casual a tone. Aim on academic setting for this test. Now, hopefully your ideas are presented in a logical order. So a very clear beginning, middle, and end, again with those transitions to help link ideas together. And as you will be speaking for anywhere from 60 seconds to 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes on your Cael test, you're going to want to fill the time with novel ideas. We don't want to just repeat the same idea a few different ways in order to fill the time. So hopefully you've got an appropriate number of main ideas and details to comfortably fill that talking time. At the end, try your best to fit in a concluding remark. This is oftentimes just a quick summary of the main point that you were making to draw that response to a natural finish. Now, last but not least, the raters will look at how completely, you've answered the question. This is task fulfillment. So 2 things are being assessed here. The time is taken into consideration. So if you are speaking for 2 minutes, you'll want to get pretty close to that without being cut off and without also finishing so early that we don't have yet a complete response. You don't have to be perfect. The raters will not expect that. So if you are asked to speak for 2 minutes, let's say, and you finish in 1 minute and 50 seconds, as long as you have provided a really accurate response or a really complete answer, I guess, the raters will not be unhappy with you. So try your best to get close to that end time as best you're able. And again, fully answer the question. If there were 2 parts to that question, it's really important to give ideas and details that reference both parts. And that's how the raters will give you your score. So the score does come from a combination of all of these skill sets that you see here. We can't just do really strongly in one of them and a little bit weaker in the others and expect to get a high score that we want. We really do need to practice skills across all of these categories in order to maximize the entire overall score for that response. So let's take a look now at the practice question that we will be working with today. Your question is always going to be on the top right-hand side of your screen as you see here. So this is exactly what you would see when you sit down to do your own Cael test. Today's question says, what are some good strategies to help everyone work together in a group project? And which do you think would be best for you and why? Now, we answered this question last week. We're also going to answer it today, but by using a completely different approach. So I'm hoping it'll give you some ideas about the different ways that you can structure your answers on this test. Now, first, I'll just remind you that your instructions, as you see on the left-hand side of the screen, will be the same for this question on the test. We know by now, after discussing that lengthy checklist, that we must give details and examples to support our answer. We also know that we're being evaluated on the content and on the accuracy of the ideas and language that we're using. Now, the good news is we've always got some preparation time. We get to think about our answer before it's time to record. And the clock is always up here in the right-hand corner. So this is where you'll keep an eye to understand exactly how much time you have for these 2 tasks. The preparation clock is going to be right here beneath the question. So as soon as you come to the screen on the test, for this question, you're given 60 seconds to prepare. So that 60-second clock is just going to start counting backwards. And once it reaches 0, you're going to be moved automatically to the recording section, where you'll be speaking in this case for 90 seconds. All right, so it's just really wise to keep an eye on that timer to know how much more time is left. Now, 60 seconds of preparation time will go quickly. So we'd better talk quickly about what we want to do with that time to be efficient. The first thing we do, of course, is to read and understand the question. So part of your prep time does actually include reading that question over. Now, we just read it out loud together, so let's review it quickly here from the bottom of the screen. You'll notice there are 2 parts to this question. So the first part talks about strategies. You must identify some, doesn't tell you how many, but more than one, multiple strategies to help with group work. And then the second part of this question is all about selecting the strategy or strategies that work best for you and explaining why. So once you've understood both parts of that question, I would strongly recommend you take very brief notes. You won't have time to write down full sentences, and you don't need to worry about grammar and spelling and things like that, but you'll want to write down just a guiding outline to keep you focused as you're about to give the response. So start thinking about how you're going to open up this particular answer. Now, one effective way that you might approach some of these questions on the Cael test is when they're asking you to talk about your own experience, like you see in this question. It's often wise to think of an actual experience that you had at school or at work. In this case, perhaps where you worked as part of a group and had a very successful outcome. So if you could just tell the personal story of yours as your answer and point out the strategies that your group used as it worked effectively together, and then identify the strategies that worked personally for you, that's an excellent framework. It's like telling a narrative story. So we're going to listen to a speaker actually give his answer using this narrative approach. And he's going to tell us about a school project that he completed. It had something to do with a drama scene. So this represents a mock note that he might have made while preparing to record his answer. So once he considers or identifies the personal experience that he wants to share, he then has to quickly think of some strategies that his group used while they were working on that project at school. So we've got 4 different strategies here listed. Again, they're very short. We're using some short forms where we can because we don't have a lot of time. So the strategies here deal with, dividing the project maybe into different parts and assigning roles to different teammates. Looks like they used WhatsApp as an online platform to exchange contact information. So I guess they could keep in touch that way. They also scheduled tasks. So I'm assuming they had their own little deadlines to meet as they went along with this project. And then giving feedback is another strategy that is listed here as well. So once you've come up with your own list, and again, try to think of as many strategies as you can for this preparation time. You'll probably want at least 3 because you're going to be filling 90 seconds of talk time, but you can list more if you've got the time to do so. But you need to make sure that you're saving time to think about the answer to that second question. Remember, you still have to select your own best strategies. So in this case, you would look back, I guess, at the list of strategies that you made just above and pick 1 or 2 that worked best for you. You must explain why. So in brackets here, we get a little bit of an explanation. So the scheduling was a strategy this speaker enjoyed, and it looks like that was because it made the workload easier. And then feedback also, this particular speaker found successful. I guess having different perspectives was very beneficial. And we'll hear more about that, I guess, in the answer. Now, you will want to have a concluding sentence. It's really hard to think of your concluding sentence in the preparation time because we don't yet know what we've said. After you've given pretty much your full answer during the recording part, you'll be able to offer maybe 1 sentence of summary just to sum up the main point you made. So I wouldn't worry about the conclusion right yet. We'll get to that in the actual speech. Now, if there's time left over, if you've got about, say, 5 seconds left even, that's all you need, I think. Just have a quick look at your list and make sure that you know which order you want to present these ideas. So since there are 4 strategies there, you might want to consider in which order you'll speak about them. So very quickly, you can just write down a couple of numbers. So you might want to talk about this one first and second. After we talked about exchanging contact info, that might make a better transition to talk about giving feedback. And then perhaps we'd finish with scheduling tasks. So just by having these numbers in front of us, again, it keeps you on track as this note is facing you when you record. So what I'd like to do next here, I'm going to play this speaker's response to this question. And as we're listening, we're going to check mark or check off the list of notes every time we see one of his ideas mentioned in his speech. So we're hoping that it's giving you some ideas about how you can take ideas from your notes and translate them into the spoken word when you actually speak and put these ideas into full sentences. Now, one more note about this. You might not have time to talk about every single idea on your notes. So part of being an effective speaker, I think, is to keep an eye on that timer and to be a little bit flexible or spontaneous. So if you notice that your time is almost up and you've only had time, say, to address one of these best strategies and not both of them, that's okay. Please don't try to cram everything in. You don't want to overwhelm your listener. It's okay to cut out an idea for time's sake to make sure that you've got a concluding sentence too. So we're going to keep an eye on these notes as we listen, just to see if we have time to talk about all of them and how it looks as we translate these notes into our response. So here we go. Let's listen in now.
Last semester in high school, my grade 12 English teacher divided the class into groups and asked us to write and perform a dramatic scene for the class. My group earned top marks for this project, and I attribute our success to the strategies that we used to work effectively as a team. First of all, we divided the project into separate tasks, then we assigned roles. For example, we needed a writer and an editor to pen the script, 2 actors to perform the scene, and another group member to assemble costumes and props. Well, after we delegated the tasks, we created a WhatsApp group online so we could contact each other outside of class time. This was especially helpful when we needed to troubleshoot potential challenges. We also scheduled completion dates for each part of the project to meet our final deadline. So for instance, the script needed to be written immediately, so we had more time to rehearse it. We needed props and costumes ready the week before our performance to ensure the actors could comfortably maneuver around the stage while using or wearing them. Establishing definitive deadlines was most helpful for me because I learned that creating a timeline for task completion not only holds each group member accountable for their own part, it also ensures that the workload is balanced. This kind of alleviates stress by avoiding last-minute changes and makes the process more enjoyable as a result.
Okay, so there we have it. That was a very succinct answer. That was almost exactly 90 seconds. I think it was just shy, just a couple seconds shy of that. So it's a very well structured answer for time. You'll notice that the speaker did indeed have time to speak about almost everything noted here, except for that one strategy listed there. I guess he had intended to squeeze in another idea about how getting feedback or offering feedback is an effective strategy for him personally, but he just didn't have time to do so. And that's okay. Again, you don't have to speak about every single idea here in your speech, as long as you've answered the question thoroughly and you've paced it well. So a really nicely structured answer. And again, drawing on your own personal experience should make the storytelling part of it a little bit easier because you yourself know what happened. So you can just tell the story in the order of the details of the events themselves as you think back. Now, I am going to play this response a second time. We're going to follow along with the transcript this time. And you will not have a transcript on the real test. So I just wanted to clarify, the raters would never see the words that you're actually speaking out loud. They're just going to listen to your recording, and that's where they'll give you the score. But because we're studying together, it's just very helpful for us to follow the words as well. So I'm going to play this response one final time. We can follow the transcript. And as you're listening, can you please really focus in on those speech delivery skills? So we want to see what the speaker does quite well. What are the strengths? So assess things like volume and pronunciation and rhythm. Check for any pauses or interjections. And if there are any weaknesses to note, you can note those as well. We'll talk about them after we've followed through this response.
Well, in my final semester in high school, my grade 12 English teacher divided the class into groups and asked us to write and perform a dramatic scene for the class. My group earned top marks for this project, and I attribute our success to the strategies that we used to work effectively as a team. First of all, we divided the project into separate tasks, then we assigned roles. For example, we needed a writer and an editor to pen the script, 2 actors to perform the scene, and another group member to assemble costumes and props. Well, after we delegated the tasks, we created a WhatsApp group online so we could contact each other outside of class time. This was especially helpful when we needed to troubleshoot potential challenges. We also scheduled completion dates for each part of the project to meet our final deadline. So for instance, the script needed to be written immediately, so we had more time to rehearse it. We needed props and costumes ready the week before our performance to ensure the actors could comfortably maneuver around the stage while using or wearing them. Establishing definitive deadlines was most helpful for me because I learned that creating a timeline for task completion not only holds each group member accountable for their own part, it also ensures that the workload is balanced. This kind of alleviates stress by avoiding last-minute changes and makes the process more enjoyable as a result.
Okay, so as far as just the speech delivery skills go, I think it was very strong. I don't have a lot to comment on the weaknesses at all. I think his volume and pacing were just fine. We could hear it okay. His intonation and his rhythm are also quite natural. You'll notice that even if you hadn't seen the transcript, you could easily identify when one new idea was being presented and then when it was finishing, and then when the next idea began. So the voice tends to, as I say, rise and fall in intonation there as well. There weren't any true interjections in the sense of we didn't hear any ums or ahs. There were a handful of words instead that the speaker uses, I guess, out of force of habit that act almost as interjections. You'll notice right in the beginning, the very first thing he says is, well, in my final semester, and he uses that word again, well, later on, well, after we delegated the tasks. And then right at the bottom, he'll mention, this kind of alleviates stress. So these expressions that he's using act almost as filler words to bridge the gap between the time it takes for him to think of his idea and get to the next main point. So overall, they don't distract us from the response. It's not problematic because there aren't any glaring pauses or huge interruptions. So well done all the way across the speech delivery skills for sure. Now I'd like to look at the other parts of the answer here as well, the other parts of that checklist, I should say. We'll focus on the language next. So we'll do the conjunctions and transitions as we see them on the screen. So the words in red represent all of the connecting words or phrases that our speaker is using, again, to take these shorter, simpler ideas and creating longer, more complex or compound sentences. At a quick glance, I do notice some of the more basic conjunctions that I'm sure we'll all use from time to time. So these would be and so. I see those words quite a few times. But at least above and beyond that, our speaker has actually used some higher level conjunctions. I see 4 of them actually, so there's a nice variety. I notice the words when, before, while, and because. So when we use these types of connecting words, we are successfully creating complex sentence structure. So there is a nice variety of structures as well as connecting words. Beyond just the conjunctions, there are a handful of phrases as well that act as transitions. So we see words or phrases like for example, for instance, and at the end we notice as a result. So again, when you're adding these phrases and these ideas in, you're creating these smooth connections so that the listener can follow very easily. So it really helps the organization of the whole piece as well and demonstrates some academic structures. I am quite impressed with the ability here in vocabulary itself. So the blue words that we're currently looking at represent academic language that's very precise and very suitable for this topic that asks all about group work and for the story about this drama project, I guess. So I'll just read out the phrases aloud and you can digest them just to sort of assess them to see how high level they are, some of them. We've got perform a dramatic scene, attribute our success, work effectively, to pen the script. That's an interesting way to say to write it. I guess it's a little bit more creative. Assemble, delegated the tasks. I quite like that one. Troubleshoot potential challenges, scheduled completion dates, ensure, comfortably maneuver, establishing definitive deadlines, task completion, accountable, workload is balanced, and alleviate stress. So again, all of those words are used correctly in a grammatical sense, but you can see how specific they are, and you can see how sophisticated as well this speaker's vocabulary truly is. There's one expression, it was hard to find really one to fix, but there is one expression towards the top there, the second and third line down. It says top marks. So he's speaking about how his group earned top marks for this project. We understand the idea. We know that the group scored well. That expression might be just a little bit casual for an academic sense. So perhaps giving a specific detail here would make that just a little bit higher level. So even had he said, you know, my group earned 90% for this project, or a high grade, or an A+, or whatever it happens to be, that might just sound a little bit more formal. But again, we can't complain. There are so many strong examples here of academic vocabulary. Now, the content and organization is also quite strong. Again, using your own personal story to frame an answer is a really effective way to go sometimes on the Cael test. So in the opening of his answer here, as we can see, he is drawing on that experience in the grade 12 English class, looks like, has to do with a drama scene that they're writing. So he tells us when this is happening. We first know it was in the final term of his high school, and we understand right away what the project was about, how they had to write and perform this scene. So again, he's set the stage, so to speak, and he's connecting his narrative framework to the topic about strategies for effective group work. He even uses the word strategies and success right at the end of that opening statement. So he's really introduced this topic quite strongly. Down at the bottom there, his concluding statement is very brief. All he does is basically state that this was an enjoyable process. So in a sense, he's tying back this notion of working together as a group to complete, I guess, a successful and enjoyable project. It emphasizes how these strategies were working well for them. So I think that that's just fine given the time at hand. So the coherence of this piece is strong. It connects. All the ideas flow really well together. Now, when we look at how he balanced his time between answering both of those questions, we can see that he has indeed offered both main ideas and then supporting points for each. So the green words here represent the strategies, first of all, that he's identifying. They look like there are four different strategies that he was able to discuss that his group used to complete this project. So you'll notice first we get the word strategies right up top, and then we see divided the project into separate tasks, assigned the roles, contact each other, and scheduled completion dates. So that's just a list of those 4 strategies as he incorporated from his notes. And then in between each of these mentioning of the strategies, you can see the details that he's using. So when he says we assigned roles, he takes the time to give the examples. So he lists all the different tasks at hand. So they needed a writer. Looks like they needed some actors, somebody to do costumes and props and so on. All right, and he continues that format all the way down as well. So scheduling completion dates. He says we had to get the script written first, then we had to rehearse, then we needed, again, so he's taking the time to extend and support all those ideas. And that's really important in Cael. You'll want to do that for each main idea that you present to fully maximize your score. Now, the orange at the bottom there is the answer to the second part of this test question. So you see that he identifies the strategy that's most helpful for me. That's that main idea presented. And the one strategy he has selected to talk about here is establishing definitive deadlines. So that's just a nod above to scheduling those completion dates. Do you notice how he's varying his language? He himself is using synonyms and paraphrases to discuss similar ideas here throughout his response. And again, he takes some time to describe why having those deadlines is so important for him, because it looks like he wants every group member to do their share, to be accountable for their part, as well as to alleviate or lessen stress so that they know exactly when things are due and they don't have to cram everything in last minute, I guess. So again, a very full answer. So task fulfillment, the speech is almost exactly 90 seconds. It might just be about 3 or 4 seconds short of that. So that's fine, that's perfect. The raters will be quite happy with the length of time here. And because the response itself addresses both parts of the question with lots of supporting detail for each main idea presented, it's a full and complete answer. So the task fulfillment for this question is also done quite well. So let's summarize, I guess, what strategies we might use when we're answering this second question for speaking on the Cael test. So we call it type B. It happens in part 1 of the Cael speaking. It is a 90-second question, so I would recommend at least 3 ideas, I should say, to get to the end of that 90 seconds of talk time. So our speaker today had time to fit in 4 strategies. Again, I think 3 strategies minimum would be needed to fill up that amount of time. So if you have time to do more, that's great. You can always open with a general statement. You can use an opinion. It depends on the question at hand. For this particular question, I don't see how an opinion is even relevant. So we wouldn't start with that. We could have made, I guess, just a general statement about group work in general. But what this speaker decided to do was introduce his own personal story. He was using these, again, personal experiences to frame the entire answer. So that also made a very effective opening here. When it comes time to getting all your ideas down, you want to introduce them. So you'll notice that our speaker first mentioned about successful strategies for group work, and he used transitions like first of all, and so on. And then before he selected the one that worked best for him, he very clearly indicated that using a direct phrase as well. So again, it's really helpful just to draw in your listeners' attention to when you're shifting ideas throughout your response. And you want to leave a little bit of time for your wrap-up statement. And our speaker did that today with a simple nod to the success of the project and how enjoyable the process was at the very end. All right, so we've now practiced 2 different sample responses for this exact question on our practice for type B. Join me next week and we will continue to work on our speaking skills. See you then.